Believe it or not, most people think that we have souls. Even if they're not religious, survey data indicates that over 60% of Americans think that we have souls that will persist after we die. So the question on the table today is, do we really have souls? How do we know that we have souls? Or are we just simply physical beings that have no immaterial aspect to our nature? I'm joined today by Dr. Kyle Keltz, who's going to help us unpack these questions. Kyle is a Christian scholar. He has a PhD in the philosophy of religion and is a college professor who teaches English and philosophy. Kyle, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on, Fuzz. I think that's so interesting, the statistics about how many people believe we have souls, whether they're religious or not. I think it's just so interesting that it just shows kind of the power of human intuition. Yeah. But in my studies in philosophy of religion, one of the most fun things I've learned about is the philosophy of mind and why we think we have a mind, at least from a Christian perspective.
Yeah. Well, what do we mean when we use the term soul? How would you define soul?
Okay. Now that's a great question because there's a couple of takes on it. There's a bit of an intramural debate in Western philosophy and in theism today. But one idea of what a soul is more of the older Aristotelian idea that the soul is the principle that distinguishes between life and non-life, a rational life and non-rational life. So Aristotle, and this was picked up by a lot of Christian medieval philosophers, Aristotle believed that a soul is the principle that distinguishes, that can make something be alive, like plants. They have a soul because they're alive. Animals, non-human animals, have a sensitive soul that they're not only alive, but they also have consciousness and they can move themselves. And then you've got the rational soul, which is the human soul, where we're not only alive and we're conscious, but we also can reason and we can know the world. But there's also, in the history of Christian thought and the philosophy of mind, you have René Descartes kind of coming on the scene in modern times, and his view is picked up by a lot of Christians today, and it's what's called substance dualism. His idea was a little bit different because in Aristotle, you were like a soul, or what a person is a form matter composite. But anyways, René Descartes thinks that the soul is a separate substance, the body is another substance, and when you put them together, you get a human being. But the metaphysics of it aren't all that important. What's important, I think, for our discussion is that the soul is thought to be this immaterial principle of some kind in a human person. And what's important about it is that an aspect of the soul is that an intellect and a will. But if I was just going to try to tell somebody on the street, I'd say a soul is just, there's something immaterial about human beings. There's more to us than the physical.
Right. So how would you distinguish soul from spirit, or in your view, is there any distinction?
A spirit, I think, is more of when you're talking about the will. Someone's attitude. The interesting distinctions to me are like when we're talking about the differences between humans and animals. I know the Bible talks about animals being soulish, and I think we're going to talk about here in a second some of the philosophical reasons why we think we conclude that we do have a soul. Some of those are from consciousness, and what I've always thought was interesting is Aristotle's idea that there is a sensitive soul, this type of soul that animals have. Humans have a different kind, and I've always thought that was interesting. That would kind of confirm what the Bible says if you're interested in that philosophy and you think that's correct.
Right. So then, how do we know that we have a soul?
Okay. Well, there's several ways. I'm glad you asked. I love talking about this. There's several ways that we conclude it. One that I've mentioned to you before is more of a negative way, It's so interesting because there's an argument. It's called the argument from reason, and people who like C.S. Lewis should be familiar with it because he's famous for kind of formulating it. But it's more of a negative way, because what it shows is that if you think we don't have a soul, it's actually it's irrational to believe that.
Right. If we don't think we have a soul, we're just simply physical entities, right?
Yes.
Where the soul is equivalent to the brain or something like that.
Right. Yes. If you think you don't have a soul, then basically what that entails is that everything about you is physical. Everything about you is material. So the problem that C.S. Lewis points out is that if everything about you is physical, then everything about you is going to be controlled by the laws of nature. And an issue with that is that if everything about you is controlled by the laws of nature, that would include even your mental processes, even your conclusions. But a big issue with that is that when we talk about rationality, this is a process that assumes that you have a mind that can know things. You look at, on any given question, you look at evidence and you weigh the evidence and you make a decision. Does this evidence warrant a certain conclusion or not? But if you don't have a soul and everything about you is controlled by the laws of nature, then even your conclusion that you don't have a soul would have a physical explanation, not a rational explanation.
Right.
So if you, basically what he was getting at is if you don't think you have a soul, that itself is an irrational conclusion.
Right.
Because if that was true, then everything we do is irrational.
Right. All right, so then what are some other maybe more positive reasons?
Okay, yes, and there's other positive ways we can do it. One of my favorites, some of them get really abstract and metaphysical, but one of my favorites that's easier to explain is something we call the unity of the first person perspective. So one thing to emphasize is that everything about us is physical. Then if you were going to describe a human being, you could do it in completely physical terms and completely third person terms, right? If we're going to, say, describe an apple, we never would use first person language. We would just describe it completely in physical terms, and we'd observe it as third person observers, and we describe everything. But when you're trying to say that if you're completely physical, an issue is that there's facts about us that can't be explained in just physical third personal terms. So a major issue with thinking that you're just physical, or take people who think that they're just their brain or something like that. Well, physical things are collections of physical components, right? Maybe some naturalists might even think that there can be mental things. But let's say that I say I'm just a collection of physical and mental states. One issue with that conclusion is that if that were true, then even that thought or even that statement would just be one part of the collection. The question is, how does that statement even make sense? If there's not something that's unifying that, then who is speaking? Who is the I in that statement? Right. It makes me think of Rene Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." Right. If you try to say I am nothing but my brain, or I'm just a collection of physical states, that statement wouldn't even make sense unless there's something unifying you.
Right. So you're somehow able to rise above yourself and think of yourself.
Yes.
Is that a good way to say it?
Yes, which you couldn't do if you're just a collection of physical things.
Right.
Because there would be nothing to be doing this.
Right.
Another thing that kind of goes along with that first person perspective is intentionality. When we have thoughts, our thoughts are about things, right? So let's say I'm thinking about a basketball player. I can picture a basketball player, and my thought is about one. It has intentionality. It has directedness towards a basketball player. But when you think about, say you have a snapshot of a basketball player, we wouldn't say that this snapshot, this picture of a basketball player, is about a basketball player, right? But if you think that you're entirely physical, and then maybe your thoughts of basketball players are just kind of flowing through you like ones and zeros in a computer, then your thoughts are going to be more like representations, like pictures, just going through your brain. And they're not going to be about anything, just like a Polaroid picture of a basketball player isn't about a basketball player, it's of a basketball player. So there's this intentionality that we have that can't be explained in the first person as well. Another interesting thing I like to talk about is when we try to explain our experience of the world. There's something that philosophers talk about like qualia, the what it is likeness to experience things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if I were to ask you to explain to me, what is the color red?
Yeah.
You know, and you try to explain it, you can't explain it in physical terms. You can talk about wavelengths and things like that, but that doesn't capture what it is like to see the color red.
Right.
So there seems to be this immaterial aspect of our first-person perspective of the world. You also don't. I also can't access your awareness of the world either, right? We can access every part of an apple, but your experience of the world, my experience of the world, you can't cut my brain open and see what I'm seeing.
Right.
So there's more to us than just third personal facts and physical facts.
Because you could even, you could characterize all the electrical chemical activity going on inside your brain when you're imagining the color red, but that's just simply electrochemical activity that you're observing. That activity doesn't tell you anything about what you're thinking. Right? Or what you're experiencing when you see red. It just tells you that maybe you're thinking or maybe you're experiencing something, but it can't tell you what that is.
Yes, exactly. And you can explain all that. You can explain what's happening in your brain completely physically, but your experience of the world, it cannot be explained in physical terms.
Right.
So there's more. So when we explain, when we describe some human person physically from the third person, we are describing a lot about them, but we're leaving things out. So to say that you don't have a soul is to just leave out a bunch of obvious facts about the world that aren't explainable in physical terms.
And again, it's interesting that people intuitively have the sense that they have a soul, right? That
yes.
Just again, based on that survey data.
Right. And it's that first person perspective, when you say, and I've thought about this and thinking about animal pain, if you get hurt, if you're just a collection of things, who's saying, ow, that hurts, it would just be this one part of your arm being damaged or something like that. We experience the world from a personal perspective, and we just intuitively know that there's something to us, especially whenever, I'm a different person than I was 10 years ago. I look a lot different today, but I still think I'm the same person. There's something about us that exists through time that's more than just the physical.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kyle. If you want to know more about the work of Kyle Keltz, please go to our website, reasons.org, and search Kyle Keltz's name, and you'll get a sampling of the resources that Kyle has produced for Reasons to Believe. And then also, you'll be able to find other places you can go to learn more about Kyle's work. So thank you so much.